The morning fog clung to the cemetery like a thick blanket, wrapping the gravestones in a cold, gray embrace. The sun had yet to rise fully, casting long shadows that stretched across the land. The air was damp, and the quiet stillness was only broken by the distant rustling of leaves in the wind. It was the kind of morning that felt like time stood still, a perfect, eerie calm. Ethan stood at the edge of his son's grave, his heart heavy with grief, but his mind still unable to fully process the loss. It had been 2 years since his son Jack had passed away unexpectedly, and every visit to the cemetery was just as painful as the first. Jack had been full of life, full of dreams, and yet he was gone, leaving behind nothing but memories in this grave. Ethan's eyes scanned the graveyard, as they often did when he arrived. The rows of gravestones were familiar, each one telling a story of someone lost, someone forgotten. But today, something was different. As he approached his son's grave, something caught his eye, a tree. It wasn't a big tree, but it stood out. Its branches, though still young, had begun to spread in a way that seemed almost unnatural. It wasn't there the last time Ethan visited, and he was sure of it. He had been here often, standing by Jack's grave in the same spot, and the tree had never been there before. He took a few cautious steps forward, his heart beating faster. The tree was positioned right at the head of Jack's grave, its thin branches swaying gently in the cold morning air. Ethan knelt down to get a closer look. It wasn't like any other tree in the cemetery. It had small, pale green leaves and a trunk that was almost too straight to be natural. The tree seemed oddly out of place in the midst of the other, more mature ones. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached out to touch the tree. His fingers brushed against its bark, which felt strangely warm despite the chill in the air. A shiver ran through him. It wasn't just the tree that was out of place. There was something else, something he couldn't quite explain. It was as if the tree was connected to Jack, in a way that made Ethan's stomach twist with both curiosity and fear. As he looked closer, he noticed something else, a single apple hanging from one of the branches, glowing faintly in the early morning light. The apple was unusual, far too perfect, and its presence sent a shock through Ethan's chest. His son had always loved apples. It was a small thing, a memory that seemed so trivial, but now staring at that apple, it felt like something much bigger was at play. Ethan reached out cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He was afraid to touch it, afraid of what might happen if he did. But curiosity got the better of him. His fingers wrapped around the apple, and as he plucked it from the tree, a strange warmth spread through him, filling him with a sense of calm he couldn't understand. It wasn't just the apple that had caught his attention. It was the feeling, something he couldn't explain. It was like he was being drawn into something bigger, something tied to his son in a way that didn't make sense. The air around him seemed to pulse with energy, and the fog that surrounded the cemetery seemed to thicken, as if it were hiding something. Suddenly, as if on cue, a voice broke through the silence. Soft, almost a whisper, but unmistakably familiar. Ethan's heart stopped. It was his son's voice calling out from somewhere deep within the fog. Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was faint but unmistakable, and it sent a chill through his spine. He turned slowly, looking around, but the cemetery was still empty, the fog swirling like a veil around him. There was no one in sight. The only sound was the distant rustling of leaves, but the voice was still there, echoing softly in his ears. "Dad!" It was his son's voice, soft, comforting, as if Jack were standing right beside him. Ethan's heart ached. How could this be possible? His son had been gone for 2 years, and yet here was his voice, calling him through the mist. Ethan looked down at the apple in his hand, its smooth surface still warm to the touch. The voice had come from the same direction as the tree, and now that he thought about it, the tree seemed more alive, more connected to the moment than he had first realized. Something about this place, the tree, the apple, felt as if it was pulling him into a memory he didn't quite understand. "Jack?" Ethan called out hesitantly, his voice trembling. He stepped forward, drawn toward the tree. His mind raced, but his legs moved of their own accord, pulling him closer to the strange, almost magical sight before him. The voice came again, louder this time, but still carried on the air as if it were coming from a dream. Don't be afraid, Dad. I'm here. Ethan reached out and touched the tree again, the warmth of the apple still radiating through his fingers. His pulse quickened as the fog seemed to part slightly, revealing a path through the cemetery that led to nowhere in particular. He stepped forward, the air thick with an energy he couldn't explain. The feeling of being watched, of being pulled into something he didn't understand, made his breath catch in his chest. Jack, Ethan whispered, his voice breaking as he tried to steady himself. How is this possible? There was a long pause, the silence hanging between them. Then, as if the tree itself was speaking to him, a faint glow emanated from the apple in his hand, and the voice came again, quieter this time. I never left, Dad. You just have to look. Ethan's hands shook, and he felt his legs almost give way beneath him. Was this real? Was it his grief playing tricks on him? Or was something truly happening here? Something that defied all logic? The apple? He looked at it again, this time noticing something strange. Where it had once been a solid color, it now seemed to shimmer, as if light was bending around it, and there were tiny streaks of gold weaving through the skin. Look! The voice urged again. Ethan didn't know what was happening, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. He stepped forward once more, following the strange path the fog had revealed, the eerie glow of the tree at his side. The ground beneath him felt different now, softer, almost as if it were alive with the pulse of something ancient. With each step, the fog seemed to dissipate, revealing more and more of the cemetery, until just beyond the tree something caught Ethan's eye. There, hidden behind the fog, stood a small wooden bench. On it was something that made his breath catch in his throat. A small, familiar toy car, one Jack had loved when he was a child. It was covered in dust, but it was unmistakable. Jack's toy car. The realization hit Ethan like a wave. This wasn't just about the grave or the tree. This was a place, a moment where his son was still with him. A place where memories, forgotten and buried, had come to life again. Ethan stepped closer to the bench, his heart pounding in his chest. The toy car, so familiar, so deeply tied to his son, sat there waiting for him. The soft glow from the tree seemed to beckon him toward it, drawing him in like a magnet. His hands trembled as he reached down, picking up the car with careful fingers, almost as if he were afraid it might disappear. He held it in his palm, the small, colorful toy that Jack had once loved. It was covered in dust, but it was still the same, just as Jack had left it. Ethan could almost hear his son's laughter echo in his mind, the sound of Jack racing the toy across the floor, his small hands guiding it, and his eyes full of excitement. Jack, Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. How is this possible? Are you really here? As if in response, the apple in his hand gave off a soft, warm glow, and the voice came again, faint but unmistakable. I'm here, Dad. I've always been here. You just have to see. Ethan's heart ached as he stood there in the quiet cemetery, surrounded by the fog and the glow from the tree. He had spent so much time grieving, so much time wondering if there was more he could have done, if he could have protected Jack better. He never had the chance to say goodbye. But now, standing here, holding the toy car and hearing his son's voice, it felt like Jack was still with him, as though the bond they shared could never truly be broken. I'm sorry, Ethan choked out, his voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I didn't know. The voice responded, this time clearer, warmer. It's not your fault, Dad. You did the best you could. I'm okay. I'm always with you. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes and he wiped them away quickly, not wanting to lose himself in the flood of emotions. But the weight of his grief, of years spent in silence and sorrow, came rushing to the surface all at once. He knelt by the bench, holding the toy car tightly in his hand. I missed you so much, Jack, Ethan whispered. I've never stopped thinking about you. A sudden warmth spread through him as if the very air around him was holding him tight, comforting him. And for the first time in so long, Ethan felt at peace, like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The tree behind him seemed to grow brighter, its branches swaying gently as if in rhythm with his heartbeat. The apple, still warm in his hand, glowed softly. It was as if the world around him was in tune with Jack's voice, with the love they had shared and with the connection that still remained. The fog seemed to lighten even more, revealing the small clearing around them. It felt as though time had stopped, as though the moment was suspended in a dreamlike state. Everything was still, and Ethan realized that in this strange, magical place, he had been given something he thought he would never have again, a chance to say goodbye. "Jack," he said, his voice trembling, "is there anything you want me to know? Anything I need to hear?" For a moment, there was only the soft rustling of leaves. The silence felt heavy, but then the voice came again, this time even more tender, like a soft breeze brushing against his ear. "Live, Dad," Jack's voice whispered. "Live for both of us. Don't let the pain keep you from finding joy again. I'll always be with you." Ethan's chest tightened as he processed the words. Live. It was something he hadn't allowed himself to do in so long. Grief had consumed him, making it hard to breathe, to move forward. But hearing Jack's voice, feeling the warmth of this strange moment, gave him a glimmer of hope. "I will," Ethan whispered back, his voice breaking. "I promise. I'll live for both of us." He stood up slowly, still holding the toy car in his hand, and for the first time in years he felt lighter, as though the burden of his grief had been lifted, if only for a moment. He glanced back at the tree one last time, and as he did, the apple shimmered in the sunlight. It was like a final sign, a gift from Jack, a symbol of their connection that would never fade, no matter what. Ethan turned and began walking back toward the cemetery gate, the toy car still in his hand. The fog had cleared completely now, and the sun's first rays warmed his face. The cemetery, once a place of sorrow, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where he had connected with his son one last time. As he walked away, a sense of peace settled over him. Jack was gone, but he wasn't really gone. He would always be with him, in his heart, in his memories, and in the moments like this one, when the world seemed to slow down long enough for Ethan to feel that bond again. Ethan continued to walk through the cemetery, the morning sun now fully breaking through the fog and casting golden light over the graves and pathways. The air felt different now, lighter, as if the weight of the grief that had weighed him down for so long had finally started to lift. He didn't know how to explain it, but everything around him seemed brighter, more vibrant. It was as though the world had renewed itself with him, like a promise that the pain of losing Jack wouldn't define him forever. He glanced down at the toy car in his hand, the one Jack had loved so much. It was a simple thing, something that had once seemed so small in the grand scheme of things, but in that moment it felt like a bridge between the past and the future, a reminder of the joy, the laughter, and the love they had shared. And somehow, holding it again, it felt like Jack was there with him, walking beside him. David had always believed that his son was gone, that he had lost him forever. But now as he looked around the cemetery, he felt differently. Jack had left behind more than just memories. He had left behind a piece of himself, a piece that Ethan could carry with him. That connection would never fade, no matter how much time passed. Ethan paused for a moment, standing on the edge of the cemetery. His hand rested on the small toy car, and he looked back at Jack's grave. It was still so hard to accept that Jack was no longer physically there. The ache in his heart never truly went away. But somehow today, he had found a way to move forward. With a deep breath, Ethan turned away from the grave and began walking toward the exit. The air felt fresh and clear. As he reached the gate, he stopped and looked back, one last time, at the cemetery where so much of his past had been buried. It wasn't just a place of mourning anymore. It was a place of healing, a place where he had found the strength to move forward. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know how to fill the emptiness Jack had left behind. But he knew now that he wasn't alone. Jack was with him in the memories, in the love, in the way he had shaped Ethan's life. The grief would never fully go away, but it no longer had the power to control him. It was a part of him now, something that reminded him of how much he had loved and still loved his son. As Ethan walked away, the toy car still gripped tightly in his hand. He felt a sense of closure he hadn't expected. The connection with Jack, the gift from the tree, the voice, everything had come together in a way that allowed him to let go of some of the pain. He still missed his son desperately, but now he could carry his memory with him without letting it consume him. The world around him seemed brighter, and Ethan knew that somehow Jack had found a way to help him see it. Ethan continued to walk away from the cemetery, the toy car still in his hand. The day had fully broken through the fog now, and the sun shone down brightly, the warmth wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. For the first time in 2 years, he felt like he could breathe again, like something had been lifted from his chest. The heavy weight of grief and loss that had followed him everywhere now felt a little lighter. As he walked down the path leading out of the cemetery, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He didn't understand what had happened today. The strange tree, the glowing apple, the voice of Jack calling to him from beyond. But he didn't need to understand it all. Sometimes some things weren't meant to be explained. He had been given a moment, a chance to reconnect with his son in a way he hadn't even thought possible. Ethan paused at the gate, looking back one last time at the cemetery. It had always been a place of sorrow for him, a reminder of what he had lost. But now it felt different. It was as if Jack had left behind something for him, something that couldn't be erased by time. The bond between them hadn't been broken by death. It had only transformed into something deeper, something Ethan could hold on to, even in the hardest of times. "I'll be okay, Jack," Ethan whispered to the wind, his voice filled with a calm he had never known before. "I'll carry you with me, always." As he stepped away from the cemetery and back into the world outside, Ethan felt the weight of his grief no longer crushing him. The memories of Jack, of their time together, would never fade, but now they were no longer a constant source of pain. They were a part of who he was, a part he would cherish, but not let control him. The love he had for his son was a flame that would burn forever, guiding him through life, even in Jack's absence. And as he walked toward his car, the toy car still in his hand, a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A new chapter in his life, one where he would learn to live for both of them, where he could move forward with his son's memory in his heart, always. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the pain came rushing back, when the emptiness felt overwhelming. But Ethan knew now that he wasn't alone. He had Jack, and that was enough.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.